So we're going to get started today. Brand new content on incident response. Incident response flows pretty nicely right after digital forensics. In fact, you'll see those terms, next to each other. Like the term DFIR, digital forensics and incident response. So it's really our next step in, something bad has happened, and we're going to be spending a lot of today doing a lot of planning for, okay, what do we do when something bad actually does happen? Because it's very important that we have all of our ducks in a row, right? So that we're not caught with our pants down when, some kind of security incident actually happens. So let's take a look at this new content here. Right, so we're talking incident response, and specifically today, right, Ghostbusters. Who are we actually going to call when things go wrong? Who do we need on board and on our team? And so, first, at the high level, we're going to talk about what an incident actually is, right? And what is a security incident. We're talking about incident response and who's on the team, right? And we're going to talk about the different phases in incident response, right? We're going to use a framework from our friends over at NIST. They've already thought of this out for us. And so we're going to use their framework and take a look at some of the phases of incident response. Okay. So at the high level, first thing we need to know, what is an incident? What do I mean by when I say an incident or security incident? So first, let's talk high level. What is an event? Give me a definition, your own definition of what is an event.
An occurrence in time?
Yeah. Yep. Tell me a little bit more. There's something specific about it, though.
It's something that might trigger an alert, but is not necessarily malicious.
Okay, you're touching on the part. I'll give it to you. Right here is the whole thing. Right, so it's something that happens, but I guess this is the part you're touching on with the alert. Right, any observable thing that can happen on the network. Right, there's plenty of things that can happen that we can't observe, but we're talking specifically when I say event, when we talk about events in security. Right, we're talking about any kind of event that you can actually observe. Right, on your network. So next question. What is a adverse event?
An event that has malicious consequences?
I like the consequences word. I don't necessarily love malicious, because I can imagine an adverse event that is not necessarily malicious, but definitely has consequences.
Anything that violates AAA. Is that?
Trying to think. Hold on. Trying to red team your answer here. Anything that violates AAA. Try to think of one that will have negative consequences, but not necessarily violate AAA. So AAA is authorization, authentication, and accounting. Oh, okay. I take down, or here, not I, a web server goes down. Right, that might not necessarily affect authentication, authorization, or accounting, but it's for sure an adverse event for our business.
So
Is this an event that happens outside of like standard operating and that would need attention or, have some sort of call to action to it?
Oh, we're getting there, right? I won't super high level. I'm not trying to trick anybody here, right? It's just any event that has negative consequences, right? Website goes down, right? Database gets leaked. Someone, any of those sorts of things, any of the observable things that happen on our network, but they're bad, right? So we're just drilling down a little bit deeper. Let's drill down one more deeper. This is where I'm gonna ask Warren for an answer for a security and privacy event.
That would be what is it? Authentication. So,
all of them.
Yeah, but going back to my previous response, I probably should have said anything that violates at least one of the AAAs.
Authentication, authorization, accounting. Well, like I said, if full stacks, one of our websites that is trying to get people in, I guess, what is a sales website, whatever propaganda we have going on, if that website goes down, that does not necessarily affect AAA, authorization, accounting, or authentication, authorization, or accounting. What it does affect, though, and I think this is what you might be saying is as well, would be CIA, right there, the confidentiality, integrity, or availability, right? You take down a web server, availability is not there anymore. So you're touching it, but I want you to touch the whole thing. So any security and privacy event, that is any event that is adversely or that is affecting CIA or AAA, right? Any of those are events for security and privacy, right? You affect the confidentiality of something, right? The integrity of something, the availability of any of those, right? Now it becomes a security event. And then finally, right? What's the term here? What is an incident? And an incident, right? What makes it an actual incident is when we violate any of the security, privacy policies or practices that we have as an organization. Okay, so someone steals your password, that's an incident, right? User gets phished, that's an incident, right? User exfiltrates data, believe it or not, incident, right? Anytime we're now breaking our security and privacy practices and policies, this is when it finally becomes elevated to an actual security and privacy incident. And when you activate the incident response team. Okay, we're going to be looking at security and privacy events all the time, right? Someone logging into a web server, right? That's a security and privacy event, but it's not necessarily malicious. It's fine, right? People log into the web servers all the time. People log into their accounts. Those are security events, and we'd be aware of them. But it only becomes an incident when we break our policies and practices. Okay, so just drilling down what makes a security incident. All right. So NIST comes out with this fantastic model here for how to handle incident response. This is the NIST 800-61 framework. I don't think it's too many. I think I want to say it's like 70-ish pages. So, relatively light reading material here. We're going to talk about this incident response sort of life cycle here. And so as you can see by this somewhat confusing diagram, this is both a linear and a recursive / iterative process here. You can see we have 4 phases, right? And each of these 4 phases kind of maps pretty nicely to the NIST framework that we're already familiar with, which has identify, protect, detect, respond, and recover, right? You'll see a lot of overlap here. And so we're going to look through each one of these phases. We start with preparation, right? You move on to a detection and analysis phase, which is constantly cycling between containment, eradication, and recovery, right? And going back to detection and analysis, going back to containment, eradication, and recovery. That's like that mantra I told you before of scan, patch, scan. That's that right there, right? Your detection analysis, your patching, and you're going back to detection analysis. Make sure that your patch took. Make sure that everything is working as it should be. And then finally, we have this post-incident activity. Just because you bring a system all the way back online, right? Maybe you're able to restore all of the data. Everything seems to be back to where it was before. Right now is when you start post-incident activity, finding out what exactly went wrong and how do we improve such that this doesn't happen again. We're going to take a look at each of these steps a little bit today and a bit more deeply throughout the week. Okay. So first, we need a team, right? Just like Ghostbusters, right? They're a team. And when you have an incident response or an incident, you need a response team or a CSIRT, a computer security incident response team, right? So some of you may eventually go on to work in a SOC. Some of you may eventually go on to work in a CSIRT. Some of you may work somewhere else, but know that these are available options to you here. And so first thing we want to ask, right, just like we have Ghostbusters, we have our 4 people on our team that we need, right? Who do we need on an incident response team? Who do we think we need on a team? I'll start. I'm going to say on an incident response team, we need an incident management team lead. I say we need someone to oversee everybody else, right? To kind of make sure that things are happening. I would say this person needs both hard technical skills and they need soft skills because they need to communicate both above, right, to executives and below to the analysts that are working with them, right? Who else do you think we need on our CSERT team?
Legal.
Legal? Absolutely. We're going to need legal on our team. I'm not going to go to the next thing yet because it's one of my later ones, but yeah, we're absolutely going to need legal on our team, right? They're going to help us know if we need to press charges. They might help us know what data we need to record for evidence if we want to press charges. They will let us know how long we need to record that data, or at least be able to help us in answering these questions. All right. Who else should be on our CSERT team?
The CEO or maybe like the CISO?
I would say probably not. I'd say they'd probably be involved and alerted if something's happening, but I don't think they would necessarily be right on this team.
Subject matter expert.
No, subject matter experts, right? So can you give me like a specific example who you might be thinking of?
And depending on the incident, if it was a network incident, maybe the network engineer.
Right. So exactly like you said, network incident, you'd probably want whoever your network engineers were. Maybe a database, something gets broken on the database. Maybe you'd want whoever the database admin is to be, you might want to pull him into the team depending. There's one that you're all forgetting.
Could like somebody from finance be involved? Or
Potentially, but I wouldn't think of them on the CSERT team right away. Who else would we
Maybe
want?
like a SOC analyst or something.
Yeah, right. We want some security analysts here, right? These are you guys, right? The people that are going to be doing the bunch of the grunt work here, right? We need analysts to actually take a look at some of this data, to actually collect the data, the analysts to write the reports, right? We need those folks doing it. Now, oftentimes when there's an incident, there may be one analyst working under your incident management team lead, maybe a couple analysts working under the team lead. Generally, these analysts will be split into 2 different sections. You have what's called a triage analyst, right? Just because there's an incident happening doesn't mean there's more alerts popping up constantly. So you may pull in some more analysts to work on, make sure everything is currently fine, right? Take a look and filter false positives out, and just being ongoing detectives. But we'll also have specialized forensic analysts that'll do a lot of the detective work, like what we were doing yesterday, right? That are trying to piece together all of the different pieces of information, create a timeline, right? All of that. What else we got? This is what Tim said before, but right, subject matter experts. We might need the IT admins. They might be part of our CSERT team. MD said before, absolutely. You're going to want legal on your team. And there should be someone that is involved, at least from legal. Here, no one had mentioned before, but PR. You can best believe you're going to have PR for the external facing response you have to major hacks, right? You can absolutely believe that SolarWinds has some kind of PR team out there for how they're going to communicate this with the public, right? FireEye for sure had PR when they were just hacked. There has to be some sort of ordered communication to the external sources, to the media, right? So these are people that should be involved in your CSIRT team. Others, I would say, are maybe threat researchers, right? People that are up to date on threat intelligence and context and kind of know what the bad guys are up to, right? This would be people that are up to date on North Korea's, for example, in threat intelligence and context, and maybe they would have been aware that they had been starting this whole phishing campaign to get security and researchers, right? Maybe you'd pull one of those in. Okay. Important things to note is that your CSIRT is the single point of contact for incident response, right? This is the A team right here that we're going to go to when an incident occurs. The thing is, right, you want an incident response team that is always available, right? Because incidents happen when you don't want them to, right? When you're not looking. That's when the bad guys do things. And so it gets very expensive to keep a team, right? That includes at least all of these people, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, at least 5 people, right? That are all, we need that going 24/7. And so that is an expensive resource to use. And so oftentimes, if you're working for a small or medium-sized organization, your CSIRT is going to be outsourced, right? Again, right, emergency response is 24/7. You need to be on call. And, this type of service is really expensive to provide. So most small and medium companies are going to be outsourcing this to some kind of company that does IR. Right? Unless you're talking about working for like Google or some FANG company, they have their own CSIRT teams. If you're working for a government, they have their own CSIRT teams. But for most small and medium-sized organizations, this is going to be something that's outsourced. Right? There are pros and cons to outsourcing things, of course. One pro is that this might be in some ways a lot cheaper. Right? It's either your company has to pay for having these people on 24/7, or you only pay for it when you actually get an incident response and you need the team. There are other benefits to outsourcing it as well, right? There's probably, for example, if you have an insider threat, it's probably better to have an independent sort of audit, right? If the threat is coming from inside. But you also get certain subject matter experts working on CSIRT teams, right? They just have more experience because they're probably doing more IR. So things to be aware of here, right? Okay, cool. Any questions on building an incident response team and who should be on it? Okay.
Are CSIRTs, do they often change? Like you said, for small to medium size, or even like large companies?
What do you mean change? Like who's on them?
Yeah. Who's on them?
Absolutely. They change who's on them. And we're going to be, not too many spoilers, I guess, but when we talk about lessons learned and postmortems, right, sometimes maybe someone needed to be on the CSIRT team and they weren't. Right. So absolutely, CSIRT teams change, and they should change depending on, what evaluations you do. Like, did we do a good job? What lessons learned after incident response? So we'll talk a bit about this. And yes, they can change, and they always depend on the context of your organization. Okay, so at the that NIST framework, right, we had that cool graphic. At the leftmost, we have the phase preparation. And this maps to, if we look at the NIST 5-stage framework, the identify and protect stages. Okay. And so what do we do in the preparation phase? What do you think we're doing in preparation phase?
Information gathering.
What kind of information gathering?
What resources and assets do we have, and what do we need to protect?
Yes, love it. Asset inventory. Absolutely. What do we need to protect? What else are we going to be doing here in preparation? Let's say we've got a great asset list. We know what we have now. What do we do with what we have? We did the identify part.
Maybe create a game plan for specific scenarios.
Ooh, love that. you're getting ahead of me, but yeah, right. Preparation is going to involve making some kind of game plan or playbook for what happens when X, Y, or Z happens. Okay. The other thing I want to mention, right, so creating organizational policies, exactly what you're saying. Creating the CSERT team, right? We have to get these people on board and let them know this is their responsibility. You know, maybe at some points when there's an emergency, you might be called to shift your duties and come join the CSERT team to go do things. Right? We have to make sure those people are aware of it. So things here I'm talking about is make sure we have the staff members and make sure they have the authority to act. This is where you'd want to, Gigi, you want to get that CEO and CTO or CISO on board, right? Make sure that your computer emergency response team or incident response team has the authority to do whatever they need to do. Additionally, here we got the partner teams that we were talking about before. Make sure we got the lawyers that we need. We got the PR we need. We have the IT admins that we need, right? Make sure that they are set there too. I wanted to touch before when we were talking about identify and protect, you do the asset inventory, of course. But the other thing we do inside preparation is the protect part, right? So talking about hardening systems. So let's make this a little bit interview prep sort of thing. How would you harden a web server? Let's get some examples. How would you harden a web server?
Firewall.
Love it, right? Get a firewall. What kind of, no, I love it. What else would we do? Get a firewall on the web server. How else do you want to harden it?
Could we place it in a DMZ?
Like that, right? We could perhaps separate it from other things. Now, will putting the web server in a DMZ count as protect? I guess it'll protect other things. So I'll keep it. I'll keep it. I'm splitting hairs. I'm trying to red team people here. What else? What else can we do? We put our web server in a DMZ. It has a firewall protecting the DMZ. What else? Come on, you got plenty of answers here.
Restrict access,
Give me more by restrict access.
like IP accesses.
So such that only like give me more.
So like only people who have the authority to be in a certain place can be in a certain place.
Okay. I like the answer, but I will say it's not necessarily specific to hardening a web server. What else for web? Come on. You guys have broken some web servers before. What things would have stopped you? I'm thinking of some examples right now. I'm thinking of Bob, if you remember Bob.
Making sure like default credentials aren't being used on anything.
Default. I like default credentials. Right? Any of the credentials for the application. So think of things like when we broke into a bunch of the websites that were, was it WordPress? Some of them had weak passwords, right? So, right, that would include for hardening a web server, making sure the accounts associated with it or the application accounts associated with the web server are secured. So some kind of credential management. I'm talking here, I'm just going to spit out the things because you'll kick yourselves now, but patching, hello, right? Patching web servers should be one of our, should be number one thing here. Closing non-default ports or ports that are not necessary. TLS certs, right? Let's take that HTTP to HTTPS. Permissions, like was mentioned before, that I'll put that again with application credentials. And the one that was thinking about Bob is where the web server is installed. If you remember for Bob, that was where the web server was installed in the FTP directory. You remember that way back when? You were able to upload things onto FTP and it was able to go into the web server. Cool. All right. Anyway, those are that's how we can harden a web server. I wanted to make sure that every day, at least we do a little bit of interview prep like that. Anyway, so these are the people on our CSERT team. And this is how we're doing our preparation. What else do we need? We're going to need hardware, software, and information. right? We need those firewalls. We need whatever software firewalls, our IDS, IPS systems, right? Information about what information is actually needs to be secured or not. Right? All of that needs to be put into place. Right? What do we need? We need hardware and software forensics, right? Bootable images, backup cloning devices, all of those things we were talking about. This fits under that preparation phase. Okay. And just like you said, putting playbooks into place. We're going to be doing some of that today, building some playbooks. We'll be showing you online where you can find some playbooks that you'll customize yourself. Really cool stuff. Do your role playing. Okay. Logging, monitoring, and alerting system. All that stuff needs to be set up. Right. And again, just like the image was showing you, it's like both an iterative and a recursive process where you're going to continuously improve after the fact, right? Scan, patch, scan. That's your mantra. That's going to be your mantra, essentially. Okay, cool. Let's talk about preparation a little bit more. The other parts, including in preparation, are understanding what normal looks like. Normal is going to look different depending on your organization, and it's up to you to understand what does normal look like. So you can look for the things that deviate from that. Again, a single point of data is useless. You're going to be looking for trends and things outside of normal, right? Understand what we expect to happen, because if we expect something to happen and it doesn't happen, that's weird, and we should check it out. We should establish logging policies. Again, this is under the accounting section of AAA, right? We want to make sure that if something happens, we can hear it, right? Tree falls in the woods, you can hear it. Someone logs in somewhere, you know about it. Again, I keep harping on this, but synchronizing clocks, time is a hard problem, right? Time is a super challenging problem when you have a international and worldwide organization, right? And we're trying to understand and build timelines, especially when hackers are attacking around the world. So again, this is a hard problem. I'm always going to be emphasizing that. But again, this is what should happen in preparation. You should make sure that all of your systems are synchronized. We want to maintain our organization knowledge base. This is right what we were saying before. Asset inventories. Make sure you know what you're protecting so you know how to protect it. Okay. And also having playbooks established for when something goes wrong, what are we supposed to do? Literally, almost like a checklist sort of thing or flow chart. Okay. Questions on the preparation phase. How do we get ourselves ready? Cool. Okay. Move over to detection analysis, right? This maps over to the detect of the NIST framework, right? Well, obviously encompasses the detect part of the NIST framework. And the idea here is you want to make sure, right, that the security event that you're looking at is actually a security incident, right? We've looked at things before where, right, someone logging in SSH, that's a security event, but it's not an incident unless it was, a user telling you that someone else logged into their SSH and it wasn't them or something like that. Someone stole their password, right? That's when it becomes an actual incident. And so your job in this detection analysis phase is confirming it, is validating that this security event is actually an incident that needs to be responded to. So the question is, first, where do we get our detection indicators, right? Where do we get our security events that we need to look into? Only one place. The biggest place. Sorry, go ahead.
Logs.
Okay, logs. What else?
IDS.
Yeah, right. Our IDS IPS that is going to throw alerts to us. What else? So it might be a little more out there.
Software like Snort.
Yeah, so that'll be under IDS IPS. Can find out from, like, how did we find out that North Korea is attacking security researchers? There's public info. So I'll put under detection analysis, right? We have our SIM, right? Snort, IDS, IPS, right? Under under alerts. We have logs that are potential, indicators that we should be looking at. But then there's the public stuff too, right? We're finding out from threat intelligence that, some APT is doing one thing. So we should look out for that. We might also find out from people, right? On Twitter, right? What's her name? Oh gosh, was it last year? The year before? What's her name? Hacked some bank and then posted on Twitter about it. If you look up, you'll see it. She posted her public info and that she hacked this bank. And there you go. There's your detection indicators right there on Twitter. There's publicly doing it. So I want to make sure that is available and something that you're thinking about when we're talking about detection and analysis here. And so what we want to do is find out the story, right? Blue team is all about the stories and context, right? Any of those things that I said before can be potential indicators. Anything as simple as, one of your employees says, someone at their front desk is saying their computer is running slower. Potential indicator that might be worth looking into. Maybe. Right? We have to be able to tell the story. So what do we do in detection analysis? We correlate the events and combine the sources, right? We say, was this a false positive? Was it benign? Was this malicious, a positive hit? Or are we not sure? And maybe we should escalate to someone who maybe might know more. Right. So first question is, how do we make our decisions? What's the tool, the number one tool we're going to be using for this event correlation and combining sources? What's it called?
SIEM.
Yep. Use a SIM. Use a SIM or SIEM. Right. That's what we're going to be using for correlating all this evidence, for, putting up the strings and matching who did what at what time. We can also capture network traffic and other evidence. There are pros and cons to this, right? Pro is we have it. We could look through it. Con is this is expensive, right? Anytime you want to store all of the stuff, store it for a while, right? You got to think of the bandwidth. If you're putting some kind of network tap and splitting the data as it goes through, you got to consider bandwidth. Right. So again, we're always making trade-offs. It's important for you in this phase to understand that you're capturing what you need to capture. Right. We're filtering the information from the noise, right? Using either Wireshark, using your SIM to cut down from all the junk. So we could look at specifically the incidents we want to see. Right. We need context for how we make the decisions. We need to know what normal looks like, right? Normal in terms of system usage, normal in terms of network flow data, normal in terms of what processes should be running and what software should be running on the machines, right? It's up to you to ask for help from the specialists so that you can determine if, again, you're going to see false positives, true positives, and things we're unsure of. And, feel empowered to reach out to your content specialists and do correlation, right? You might see something that you're like, hey, this looks like SQL injection. Maybe I should go speak to, someone, the database administrator. They could help me out, right? They might look at it and be able to tell if this is SQL injection or not. And then, you want to do some analysis, right? So, okay, they confirmed that it's SQL injection attempt. What do we do next? Well, we'd probably want to correlate with the database logs now and see, hey, was the SQL injection attempt, did it work? Because if it didn't work, right, we're going to have a different response than if it did work. And it looks like they were able to modify data on a database, right? So it's important that we're able to go through this. We do our detection, we do our analysis, because we're going to be making different decisions based on what we see. Okay. Right. If you're unsure, escalate. Escalate early, escalate often, right? If you're unsure, escalate. Okay. We've done our detection. We're doing our analysis. We found something, right? It's this phase now, which covers a whole lot, right? It has containment, eradication, and recovery, right? This is the respond and recover part of the NIST framework. Right? So what we want to do, it's respond and recover on the NIST framework. right? We've escalated our detection, right? We've confirmed and validated that this security event is actually a security incident. And now we have to act on it. So the first thing we do is this techniques of containment. Okay? And this is where, again, we want to like limit the scope and the magnitude of an incident. And we do this, right, by protecting CIA to limit how limit those impacts to the organization. Right? Do your best at the same time to preserve evidence. We have two main containment strategies. You know, we have to be careful when we do containment, because remember, right, it's, you know, cybersecurity is at the very least a two-player game. And once you start acting on your adversaries, they're going to know, right? That was the Cali phrase, the quieter you are, the more you can hear, right? You find that bad guys are on, you know, some area of your network. Maybe they got onto the DMZ web server. Are we going to act right away and just cut them off? Or are we going to see what they do for a little bit first? Because maybe they're a little bit deeper. You know, I can tell you right now, if you cut them off right away, they're going to be very quiet, even if they're still there, right? They're going to change how they act. You have that whole, you know, I know, you know, they know sort of situation happening here. And this is important to, you know, weigh these options, you know, do your threat management and threat modeling. So, you know, you want to identify if the intrusion you detect, if that's their main, you know, thing that they're trying to do, or if that's a secondary thing, right? You're never entirely sure. You don't want to alert the attackers because, you know, cutting off their ability to do harm, well, you know, you want to cut off their ability to do harm without letting them know that you know, if that makes sense. And so we have two different ways to kind of handle containment at high level. We have isolation. This is where we remove the affected component from the environment, right? We isolate it, take the server down, and we make sure there's no interfaces in between, you know, that server and the network, our network, and that server and the internet. It's like, can't talk. You can think of it as like air gapping. You unplug everything, right? When would you do this? You know, if it's really important, you know, if it's a high enough priority that you need to get them out of the system right now. Maybe that, like I said, the bad guys get onto a web server on the DMZ, or maybe they get onto a web server and there's not really anything important there. Okay, let's listen, see what they do maybe. On the other hand, they get onto a server that has PCI DSS information or personally identifiable information, right? That's a bigger deal. We're going to have to change how we respond. Maybe we get them out right away and then try and find out where else they are. Okay, cool. So that's one approach, is that's isolation, cutting off everything completely. The other approach we can take is called segmentation. And this is kind of using logical gaps, essentially, right? So we're going to be using VLANs, using routers, using subnets, using firewalls to separate the infected or the, you know, this particular machine from everything else. And you'll sometimes see this called sandboxing. Right? You're going to separate all of the other resources from this one that's infected. Other things you can do are redirect all of the attacker's activity to a specific workstation so that you can gather evidence and see what it is they're doing. Right? This is the idea behind like a honeypot. Right? Oftentimes, security researchers will set up a honeypot and share their information. Why do we do this? Because we want to see what the bad guys are doing. We want to see how they act. And so there's a honeypot for them. They try and do things. Maybe we can catch them in the act and see some of their tools. If you want to do any of those things at an organization, make sure you consult legal before you do, because you know they probably can give you a better understanding of what you can do and what you can't. Okay, cool. So that's containment here. Right? It's important that we choose and implement the correct containment strategy depending on what we see happening. Again, if you don't see a lot of risk, right, we don't have to necessarily act immediately and completely shut everything down. But if there is a lot of risk, maybe we do. Okay? Trade-offs in CIA. Right? We're always having trade-offs. We're always going to be having this conversation. Do we want to get them out immediately, or do we want to wait and see what they do for a little bit first? Okay, we're going to gather more legal evidence in this phase. right? We want to capture network traffic. We want to capture any sort of evidence that we can have to help our legal case in the future, right? We want to know all of the things that have happened. And by know all the things that happened, I mean, I want to know who the attackers are. I want to know what systems they attacked. I want to know what infrastructure they were using. And then we finally get to, once we have all of that, eradication, and eradicate the incident, which I personally love this word. I think it's great, right? When we say eradicate, we're talking complete removal and destruction of whatever caused the incident. Love that word for that, right? The exact method that we're going to use for eradication, it depends on what the incident is. Generally, like the simplest option is going to be replace the system with a clean image from a known source. Right? Something easy to do. It's the simplest way you can do it, but it's not always possible. There's some malware that does beat this, right? That can hide, and that even a clean image won't be able to defeat. You might need to completely sanitize the drive before you install a new image, right? So you might do things like zero fill to completely fill the drive with like zeros, or something like, if it's a solid state drive, doing like a cryptographic erase so that there's nothing else on that drive before you install a clean image. Okay. And finally, we want to recover the business, bring it back to where we were before, right? It's not enough to just put it on the clean image. We also have to get the accounts back in order. Maybe we have to change passwords. We have to make sure all the data is back, right? All of the systems that were in there before, they're back in place, right? Okay. So we've gotten everything back in order. Things are back in place. And so now we're going to kind of analyze the incident and see how we did. And generally, we're going to start with like a lessons learned review. Sometimes these are called postmortems. And these are going to be filled with tons and tons of reports and meetings, tons of meetings. Okay. You want to do like an analysis of events, and you want to see, you're looking for insights for how you can improve, right? These reports and these meetings should be recorded, and they should be acted on in the future, right? If you remember the diagram, right, from post-incident recovery, you go all the way back to prepare, right? We need to prepare again after the fact. We don't want this to happen again, right? What was it that went wrong? Were we too slow on patching? Was there no password management? And that's why the hackers got in, right? Any of these reasons, what could have been improved, right? You're going to be having meetings, or maybe not you, but there will be meetings with people at various levels, right? Questions are going to be asked like, were the communication plans that we set up, were they effective? Did the plans work, right? Other things that are important to note here in these lessons learned reviews and postmortems is that it's really, really important that you're not looking at this for a way to assign blame. You're just trying to understand what happened and what we can do better, right? Things that we did good, let's do more of that. Things that didn't do so good, let's do less of that, right? But not looking to blame anybody. The last thing you want to do is make a security team where, a user is afraid to report that they clicked a link and they, did something stupid. You do not want that situation, right? So the questions that you'll have are like, I'll go on to that. We'll talk about evidence retention. Right? All of the evidence that you collected, you need to hold onto for a period of time. Right? You want to preserve your evidence, depending on what your organization's policies are, and depending on what the legal policies are. Right? If you want to go after an attacker in court, you need evidence. And as I'm sure you guys are aware, justice is slow AF, right? And it costs money and it costs resources to hold on to that evidence. Every org is going to have its own data retention policy. But that policy might also be determined by law. So you having financial data, you're probably bound by SOX. You have health data, you're probably bound by HIPAA. what else do you want to do? You want to go back and fix this in preparation, right? Again, looking at that model right there. Once we do post-incident activity and have our post-mortem, it's back to the drawing board of preparation here. Okay. I think of this as if you ever played like sports and your coach made you watch replays from the game, right? This is the exact same sort of situation here. They want to talk about what went well in your incident response, what did not go well in the incident response. You're going to be answering questions at the same time, like who was the adversary? What was their motive? What was the timeline of this incident? Where did this incident happen on our network? What hosts and what areas of the network, right? How did this happen? Talk about MITRE framework and what TTPs, what tactics, techniques, and procedures did your adversary use? And then most importantly, I think in this phase is, what security controls could have mitigated this incident? And again, you don't want to focus on blame, right? Only on what kind of improvements you can make. Okay, cool. So summary, we talk about. We defined what an event is. We defined what an actual incident, right? Event is anything we can observe. Security event is any event relating to CIA or AAA. And a security incident is any security event that breaks our organization's policies or procedures relating to security. Okay. We talked about incident response and the different phases of it, as well as who's on the incident response team. NIST, the framework we're using is that NIST one. It has 4 phases. It's both linear and iterative. We talked about who's involved on the team. All right. Let's talk about these phases. We talked about preparation. Again, in this framework that encompasses identify and protect. So think about taking asset inventories, think about patching and hardening all of your systems, right? And getting ready for the inevitable attack that we're going to have. We move on to detection and analysis, right? Alerts are coming. We need to determine if these alerts, these security events are actually security incidents. Are they benign and just a false positive? Is it malicious and something we need to act on and use our playbook? Or are we not quite sure and perhaps need to escalate this or get more information from someone who else would know? We have the containment, eradication, and recovery steps, right? Okay, we have confirmed we have an incident on our hands. How are we going to limit the scope of risk that happens? How are we going to clean this thing up? And how are we going to get everyone back on their feet so it's as though nothing happened and so that it doesn't happen again? I think that's an important part on recovery. Don't just bring everything back on if the bad guys will just take you down in another hour. Right? You want to find out how they did it and stop that. That's what's encompassed inside recovery. And then finally, we have the post-incident activities. And this is actually the longest phase, right? Even though they all looked about the same length, this is actually the longest, right? You really need to take a look at what has happened, take a look at who did it, and take a look at how things could have gone better or worse. And again, it's really important. I'm going to keep harping on this. Do not, you're not looking to assign any kind of blame, but just find out what happened. Like I said, right? Like, we are in service of an organization, right? That's what IT and security actually is. And you never want to set yourself up where you are an adversary to the business or antagonistic to the employees, right? Because otherwise they're just going to work around you, or they're just not going to admit when they do something wrong. And that makes your life harder. Okay. Cool. Let's stop there.